Hey everybody, so this is actually part 2 of the little series, I guess that we'll call it, or the two-parter video, really, just so it's a little bit more, digestible for you, is ways to improve our keeping in the reptile hobby. Obviously that involves amphibians and invertebrates and stuff too. As you can see, still sitting here in front of these racks, I will have more updates for the actual shop, and you will start to see more of like individual animals and enclosures and cages that I am working on as well coming up soon. But in the meantime, we're just going to get right into this, talking about ways that we can do better, and hopefully I'll give you some examples of that as I go along, and then you will see moving forward with my content, and hopefully other people's content too. So we already talked about in the first video, we talked about minimum size enclosures, i.e. go big or go home, and then enrichment and all the different ways that we can do better enrichment for our animals. This next one, and I'm going to start off the front with the one that you've probably heard the absolute most out of, probably more than enrichment, more than the big enclosures, and that is UVB Light. This one has been really popular lately because they are really starting to find out that while some animals, specifically snakes and a lot of nocturnal reptiles, don't necessarily need ultraviolet B, so UVB light, for long, healthy lives. Not necessarily enriched, not necessarily the best, but they have had animals live well into their 30s and 40s, kept very minimalistically, or not minimalistically, but just without ultraviolet light. And they're finding that even if they don't necessarily have to have it, almost every organism benefits from UVB light, except for, like troglodytes that spend their entire life cycle like in a cave or underground and never see the light of day, period. Like they don't even have eyes at some point. But we are really starting to, and a lot of people are really starting to see that ultraviolet light is really going to be starting to be a bit of a necessity or a base standard, like a heating element for most reptiles. So, we've already known that some of them need it, like iguanas and like tegus and like monitor lizards. There's even a couple snake species out there, like the rough and the smooth green snakes. They need ultraviolet light. And without that and without, the other like calcium and multivitamin supplements, they can lead to metabolic bone disease and a whole lot of other, growth disorders, essentially. But they are finding now that they are watching the behavior of other animals that traditionally aren't associated, i.e. nocturnal lizards and snakes, that they do actually seek out ultraviolet light. And so you will see that independently, snakes will seek out ultraviolet light to bask under the ultraviolet light that isn't necessarily tied to, tied to the heat. So even if you had a ultraviolet light above there and then like the helium on the other side, or separate it a little bit out, you will see that the animal will actually favor one or the other depending on the time of the day or how that animal is feeling or whatever it is that we're interpreting that they're doing. They will seek out and spend time specifically under that ultraviolet light. And that kind of goes for a lot of nocturnal animals too. So, obviously ball pythons, but, when we think about a lot of the other ones that you're like, well, they're nocturnal, they don't need it whatsoever, right? So like leopard geckos, crested geckos. They actually will spend time in UVB light, both in the wild and in captivity under, hobbyist settings like this. And what that is, they don't necessarily entirely come out and hang out under that bulb or lamp or whatever. They do something that has been called cryptic basking. And so what that is, when you think of the term cryptic, you're thinking concealment, not being seen, hiding, blending in. That's that cryptic, right? That you don't see flashing out there. So what they do is they will expose a small portion of their body, be it a tail, a leg. In the case of like a black-headed python, where their heads are entirely solid black, scientists think that the reason why it's that way, it can absorb that heat and that ultraviolet faster, and they only have to have this much of their head, which also happens to be where they will see danger coming from easiest, so they can shoot right back in their burrow, and they only have to expose that little bit in front of them. And a lot of species of animals, including lizards, like crested geckos have been seen doing it, Leachianus geckos have been seen doing it, multiple species of just nocturnal lizards in general have been seen to do that, as well as several species of snakes have been seen to do that, as well as, for like a ball python. For a while I had one of my large, just normal ball pythons in a 4x2 enclosure. When we were moving down here, I discovered that, he's in a melamine enclosure. The melamine is starting to bow and crack, so that needs to be replaced. So he's in one of the racks right now, but he will be moving back to another one as soon as I am able to build him another enclosure. Preferably not out of melamine. But what I would witness or watch when he was in there, during the day, I would never see him. He would be under one of his 2 or 3 hides or under one of his logs or climbing branches. I wouldn't see him out. But at dawn or dusk, usually at dusk, like about 20 minutes, and they were on a 12-hour timer, about 20 minutes before that the timer would turn off, he would come out and he would sit on top of one of his larger basking, or his larger hide, or on one of his logs, and he would come out and he would be out there for a little while, and then the lights would turn off, which is about the time like the dogs would come inside and I would start moving around the house a little bit more, and then he would go back under until kind of the middle of the night, and he would come back out and he'd be out all night just cruising the whole thing. So that is the kind of behavior that we're seeing, that where a lot of these nocturnal animals are really more crepuscular, which is, I know, a big term, but a term that means active mostly during dawn and dusk, during the twilight hours. No, not the Twilight Saga, the 50 Shades of Grey fan fiction, but during twilight, where there's a little bit of heat or a little bit of sunlight coming out, either going down or coming back up. That's when they're out, when they still feel a little bit more secure, where it's not as bright. They can still get away fairly easy, where they can feel more secure that way, but they still are getting that ultraviolet light. So that is what we're starting to do, and we're starting to see more people start to do that, not just on their bearded dragons, but they're starting to put that on their blue-tongued skinks. They're starting to put that on their leopard geckos. They're starting to put that on their snakes, including myself. But at least if we can start, I would like UVB on everything, and you'll even see on a lot of my enclosures, I'm adding ultraviolet light to most of my things. At least having a 12-hour light cycle. It has been shown, and even personally too, I have seen that. That's why almost every single enclosure I have, I don't like the opaque, the gray ones. I like having the 12-hour light cycle, and I have noticed that the animals start to adapt to that. And I've noticed the marked change of their activity, as well as their starting to improvement and better success of feeding. We all know that ball pythons can be finicky eaters. Even keeping under the best parameters like me, it's all controlled. Not to say that I'm perfect or I do it the best way, but I've been doing it long enough to where I know what they need to be healthy and to survive and thrive, but it's not necessarily the only or the best way. But I noticed that if I fed in the evenings, in the late afternoons, or even at night, more of the ball pythons would hit the prey more often, more sequentially, consistently, than if I didn't have that, if they weren't exposed to that 12-hour light cycle. I've gotten better success with that, as well as actually my fertility rate of the ball python clutches started to go up too. So that's ultraviolet light, and we're gonna move right along to the next thing, which is, sorry, it's kind of a abrupt little quick thing, but I wanna talk a little bit about this, and that is basically, this is more for us than actually putting into practice, but it's our willingness to learn. So what that entails is basically that we all get this idea of what worked well, so that's the only way or the best way to do it for a long time. But that's not always the case. Like heat rocks, reptile carpet, that was a standard that we had for a long time, but we learned that those don't work. Heat rocks, they overheat all the time. It can burn and injure animals. Reptile carpet, it can rip out toenails of leopard geckos and get stuck. It's not very hygienic a lot of the time. So we don't use those a whole lot anymore. We've kind of collectively figured out that those aren't great. But there are other things that we're still working on, like, the minimalistic keeping. Big ball python producers, big boa producers, even colubrid producers, they found that just being on paper towels, little water dish, in a rack system, as long as you kept their humidity and temps and everything right, they would breed, they would eat, and they would live for a while. And they did that very successfully, both in the amount that they could produce, but also financially successful. And so everyone tried to emulate that, but that wasn't necessarily the best. And even now, a lot of those bigger people that did it that way are starting to recognize that that necessarily wasn't the best. And they're very slowly, and I'm not naming names by any means, but a lot of them are starting to kind of divert a little bit away, and they're doing more, where they're doing lots of bedding in their tubs, larger enclosures, smaller amounts of animals, adding different things to enrichment, things like that. which is great, and that's what I really like. And that being said, I'm not saying that we should ignore all of the people that have been doing this for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Although someone's been doing this for 40 years is absolutely insane, like Bob Clark. But, that comes with a wealth of knowledge and experience, and we should listen to how they do that. But right now, it's, in this world where we have access to so much information all of the time, it's still very easy for people, because we're people, to find the very first thing or the thing that looks the best or seems the best and latch onto that. What we need to start doing is looking at multiple things, and this goes for kind of in general, for all aspects of what we do. But we watch Jay-Z's Reptiles video about a particular species. Then we watch Clint's Reptiles about do they make good pets. Then we watch Dave Kaufman's video about what they're like in the wild. And then we go to a Facebook group and we join that and we talk to people who keep them, and we go to the reptile store and we see what they're like actually in person, and we look at that. So we just get a lot of information at once. A lot of this comes into like the, do your research kind of a thing before you get the animal. But to form our opinions on a broader expanse of things, and then be open to change and adapting as new information presents itself, like the ultraviolet light, like the larger enclosures, things like that. So that's really what I want to get into. What I really want to get across is just be open to learn and be open to change, just in general, but specifically for our keeping of reptiles. And then the last thing that I want to talk about, so this is number 5 total, obviously number 3 for this video, is something that it's a little bit harder to do, that not everybody does, and even then I'm not doing it as absolutely as well as other people have done it, and that is giving your animals a choice. So that is truly enrichment for your animal. That is getting your animal to really think and start to behave in a more naturalistic or more naturally behaving way, and that is to allow your animal to have a choice about what it wants to do and where it wants to go. Having your setup, you can give it a choice of where it wants to go when it comes time to, bask. So you have a spot where you have multiple basking spots of different heights, of different surfaces. So you have, a big flat piece of rock or slate, you have a climbing branch, and you have a hide that is big enough for them to rest on top at different heights under the warm side. And it can choose what it wants to there. On the cooler side, you can have one hide that has the human hide under there, a big water dish, and lots of deep substrate if it wants to burrow down, because lots of snakes are fairly fossorial, which means they like to spend time in and under the dirt. They can burrow down if they want to, so multiple places where it wants to hide, where it wants to feel secure, where it can thermoregulate between that hot and the cold, but you give it multiple chances to do that. Another way that is super easy, that's kind of cool and fun and neat, is to actually give it a choice of substrates. I first saw this at the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo. Sorry, still getting over my cold, and I've been talking for a little while. Is they will put up like a little divider, and I have emulated / copied, taken it as well, and I will divide the enclosure, and I'll do, so for instance, the Trans-Pecos rat snake. They come from part of southwestern United States, parts of Mexico, and the Chihuahua Desert, where they live in like kind of rocky outcroppings, but there's also dirt, there's also plants, there's kind of plains down there too. Sorry about that. So what I'll do is I will have a little divider there, and I will do kind of a more sandy, arid, loose play sand, gravelly type substrate on one side, and the other side it will be like one of the cool, like more traditional substrates, like my own little mix or something from like Biodude or Permian Exotics or something, where it's good for like a subtropical animal, but it's more traditionally looking versus that. And then I'll put hides on both sides, and I'll put climbing branches on both sides, or things to do that, as well as light for both. And then I'll do like, the more rocky side to be a little bit, or the more hot side, the other side a little bit more cool, and I'll separate things like that, and it can choose where it wants to go. And I've seen different animals interact with that differently. Like the Mexican black milk snake, O'Malley, he just tears it up, he'll move it over, and he'll just mix it all together, so it's a pain in the butt. But like the Trans-Pecos rat snake or the gray band king snake, they will choose where they want to be, and I will see them move around throughout not only the day, but at night as well, where they want to be, and they have their particular favorites of their hides and their spots for basking areas where they want to be. And so that's something that's really cool, and as well as for like the choice, you can offer, like for if you have like a tegu or a monitor, you can offer different variety of different prey items and maybe give them a choice of what you want. Like, you know, I've seen videos, like we all have our opinions about, like, you know, Jay from Prehistoric Pets, but I've seen his videos where he'll have like a little platter of different animal and like items for his large water monitors, and they'll let the water monitor choose what it wants to eat, which is really cool. In the end, hopefully you guys go watch the other video if you didn't watch the first one. Go watch that for the full list. But, you know, basically, you know, larger enclosures, more space. We talk about enrichment and all the different ways we can do that, from, you know, Dollar Tree, Michael's, you know, fake plants, and going out and washing and cleaning and finding your own branches and rocks. Ultraviolet light, at least 12-hour light cycle, but ultraviolet light is kind of like a new base standard if we can try to get into that. Learning new things or being open to change and adapting, as well as, if we can, start to give our animals a choice, both in what they want to do and where they want to be in their enclosures and what they want to do in general. As, like, for instance, as a whole, whenever I want to do a video, if one of the snakes or one of the lizards really does want to come out, I say, okay, we'll do this another day, just kind of like in a lot of like the zoo presentations and stuff. If they don't want to do it, I'm not going to force them to do it unless I absolutely have to, if I really can help it, 99% of the time. So just things like that. You know, not everyone is doing it perfectly. I certainly am not as well. I make plenty of mistakes. A lot of people other do too. You know, it's all about learning and growing together as a community, as a hobby, as an industry. And so that's really what I wanted to get across, is that we all just need to do better and learn from each other, learn from our mistakes, and move forward together. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. I know it's a little bit ranty. Stay tuned for future more, you know, specific and more actual reptile content. I'll have actual more animals on camera too, other than just the clips that I throw in, and lots of plenty updates coming from the shop as well. Because I have, it's a work in progress, and like the big stuff is starting to slow down, but I have a few cool surprises that I haven't really shown anybody yet that I am super excited to share with everybody. So hopefully you're having a great day, and we'll check you next time.